right, so we're gonna go ahead and introduce our panelists. If we want to kind of go in the order from left to right, top to bottom, um, starting with Sanskrit.
Hi everyone, I'm Sanskruti Patel. I am a third-year student in the Barsk MD program at the University of South Carolina. I'm going into medical school in July, so I'll be answering any questions about just like your high school, like things that you should be doing and what to prepare. And I'm interested in neurosurgery or pediatrics. I'm thinking about pediatric neurosurgery, but I'm open to any field.
All right. Hey, y'all. Can everyone hear me? You guys hear me? Okay, perfect. My name is Jameen Shah. I'm a first-year medical student at the Medical University of South Carolina. You can see some of the involvement there, some of my hobbies. I don't dance as well. Maybe I shouldn't have put it up there. I've lost practice, but with that being said, in terms of interest, just I thought I came in with something. And honestly, it's been a good problem to be interested in a lot more than I thought. And so just trying to figure out what I want to do. But right now, some sort of PED subspecialty and something interventional, something procedural. But with that, I'm excited to be here. And thanks, Sean, for putting this on. Excited to meet y'all, whether that's virtually or answer some of the questions that you guys have.
Hi, I'm Whit. I'm a first year med student at MUSC as well. Um, Things that I do right now are volunteer at the free clinics here in Charleston. We have two med student run free clinics for MUSC, and I work with both of them. I'm also an ambassador for MUSC and then do various volunteering around the community. Hobbies, running, weightlifting, and I like to watch and review movies. And my interests are pediatrics and internal medicine right now.
Hey guys, my name is Cooper Schneider. I'm a senior here at the University of South Carolina. Just applied to medical school. I will be starting medical school this July at University of South Carolina School of Medicine, Greenville. Some of my extracurriculars, I'm a university ambassador, so you might see me walking around campus giving a tour occasionally. I'm a big reading fan, love sports, love traveling. Right now, I'm kind of bouncing between orthopedics, emergency medicine, and general surgery, but going to go in with an open mind.
Hi everyone, my name is Ashley. I am an M2 at the University of South Carolina School of Medicine, Greenville. So currently I'm studying for step 1 and extracurriculars. I was the SNMA Community Service Chair. I was vice president of the Radiology Student Interest Group, and I was also involved in Ultrasound Interest Group as well as CURE, which is just a mentorship program for undergrads wanting to go into medical school. Some hobbies of mine are like traveling, reading, learning languages, and then the medical field that I'm interested in is radiology right now.
Hey everyone, my name is John B. Parvathani, and I am a first-year medical student at the Medical University of South Carolina. I'm involved in the student council here. I'm also on the student progress committee, which has been a really cool commitment and an experience to undertake. And I'm also a comm ambassador like Whit, and I'm also involved in volunteering. So I've been volunteering for the Children's Heart Walk Foundation, which is really cool because I've been given the opportunity to kind of help arrange that this year and raise money for congenital heart disorders in pediatric patients. So kind of transitioning into my medical field of interest, I have always known I wanted to work with kids, but we actually just finished our cardio block a few months ago, and it was hard, but I really loved it. And that kind of has propelled my interest into pediatric cardiology. I got into playing pickleball after I moved to Charleston. It's a great place for that. I've also gotten into running since I moved here. Lots of hobbies since I've gotten to med school to kind of keep my life a little bit balanced. And I've always loved cooking.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. Once again, my name is Cheyenne. I'm a junior at the University of South Carolina at Columbia. PhysiLink is kind of one of my bigger commitments right now, but I'm also a honors college ambassador, as well as I do some cancer research, as well as some honor societies. And I'm really interested in pediatrics, but I'm kind of with Jameen and doing some kind of subspecialty. But unlike Jameen, I do not want to do anything interventional. So we'll see what happens. we're gonna kind of go into a first kind of introductory question to this webinar, and we're gonna start with Jamie. What does it mean to be pre-med, and kind of what are the different paths in terms of other pre-health paths?
Yeah, I think that's a phenomenal question to kick it off. The answer is not as clear cut as I think people expect it to be off the bat. First of all, just when you say pre med, it means that you want to either go to MD or DO school, the goal being to be a physician. And then the other side of it is pre health. You've got pre dental, all these other terms that kind of tell you what it is. But pre health is more so an umbrella term for anything that you want to do within healthcare. So that could be occupational therapy, speech language pathology. You could go into dental, you could go into NP, um, you could go down the nursing route. So whatever that looks like, it's just an all-encompassing term that means you want to do something that requires another step within healthcare. And with that being said, I think there's a lot of, I guess, I don't even know if I'd call it stigma, but there is a lot of preconceptions around what each of those mean and what everyone's thoughts are coming into it. And so I will say one thing that I did going through the process, and one thing that I highly recommend, is even if you think you're set pre-med or you're set pre-nursing, pre-dental, shadow some of the other professions and see what that looks like. For me, even though I stuck to the pre-med side and that kind of confirmed what I wanted to do, it also on the other side confirmed that I didn't want to do something like speech language pathology, which I thought was interesting, but it allowed me to see how those professions interacted with medicine as a whole and with physicians as a whole. And I think it just allowed me to get a more complete picture. Uh, and this might be down the line for a lot of y'all, but when you interview for a medical school and when you're talking to people, just having more of that complete picture of what the landscape looks like in healthcare allows you to really have those conversations in a way where you are knowledgeable about other professions. And don't count some of those professions out. I know some people who I met that were initially pre-med and they shadowed in occupational therapy and loved it. And that was their niche. And so just find what actually drives you and then be able to answer why you picked that. Again, from a med school interview perspective, you will get that question probably at some point, why you want to go to med school as opposed to everything else. So just be able to make sure that you're doing it for a great reason, and I don't know yet, I'll tell you in like 30 years, but hopefully pay dividends in the future. So I guess that's a long-winded way of answering that question for you.
Now, do you think this is something that you should kind of decide by high school, or can you kind of explore these options in undergrad, or is that too late?
I think you should definitely explore your options in undergrad, even if you come in from high school knowing that, okay, this is what I want to do, regardless of what it is. Like, still explore your options. There's nothing wrong with having an experience and that being confirmatory of the fact that you don't want to do it. If anything, it makes your interest stronger. And so I would use throughout undergrad, all 4 years really, to continue just building on to why it is that you want to go the MD or DO route instead of something else. And for me, like, that doesn't even limit it to just health. Uh, I know I have a huge interest in policy, and I didn't talk about it, but policy and advocacy. And so for me, the conversation was, did I want to go down the medicine route and keep that, or did I want to go down the poli-sci route and then go into policy as kind of the main focus? And so whatever that interest is, college, your undergrad years are your perfect time to kind of tease out what it is that you want to be doing for the rest of your life.
Absolutely. And I will say there are a number of things that you can do in undergrad to kind of explore those options. A number of my friends, like PA and MD is fairly similar. So a lot of times they have no idea what they want to do, and they come in, join different organizations that have workshops and speakers. You could shadow and kind of just connect with people to kind of learn about these different positions. And I guess like PhysiLink is one way to do that as well, where you'll get the chance to talk to different doctors, whether that's MD or DO. So now, kind of moving on, what does the pre-med track look like? John, if you could kind of just give a general overview of all the steps involved.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I know Jamie mentioned earlier, but this is a really great initiative that you're doing. And I think it's a great way to get some high school students involved in kind of figuring out what they want to do. But it can look a little bit different for everyone starting from the beginning, but the requirements are very kind of universal. So you start off in high school. There's really not anything that's required of you in high school, but you can get involved in like volunteering. For example, I volunteered at my like local hospital. Definitely not something you have to do, but can kind of, like Jamie said, like tease out your options, see whether you're interested in the field or not. For me, I had taken a class, college and career readiness, and they wanted us to kind of start to think about what we want to do with our lives. So I was thinking about medicine. I volunteered. I realized that I loved it, and I kind of continued on with that path. But after that, I went into college and I went to the University of South Carolina. So there's a bunch of different majors, and you don't have to major in any specific thing. As a pre-med student, you can major in anything you want as long as you complete all the requirements that are asked of you in order to apply to medical school. So I majored in biology, but I know lots of people that majored in lots of different things like math, like dancing. A lot of people did public health. So there's lots of different options. But in college is when you kind of start building up your resume, maybe getting involved in organizations, taking on some leadership roles, research, and this is all down the line. So I know it sounds very overwhelming, but these are just different things or different ways of how this could look like for you in undergrad. And then junior year is if you are trying to apply to medical school right after you graduate, junior year is when you would sign up to take the MCAT, which is the medical college admissions test, the entrance exam. And you study for that, you take that, you apply to medical school the summer between your junior and senior year, and then you interview your senior year. However, if you choose to take a gap year, which is becoming a lot more popular, and a lot of people do it, it's such a great way to get some more experience in without doing so much in college, then you would that timeline would be pushed. So it definitely just depends on when you're planning to apply to medical school. And then, like I said, that can look different for everyone, but just getting involved, finding things that you're passionate about, it can definitely seem very stressful and it can seem like everyone around you is doing a million things. But one thing I've learned throughout that entire process, and especially now in medical school, is you have to stay confident in who you are and your abilities, because at the end of the day, you're doing this for you because it's something that you care about and are interested in, and it's the passion that you have. So as long as you find different like extracurriculars and different things that you can occupy your time with that really show your dedication to that passion, I think that's really all that you need to focus on. But it, again, all down the line. So no need to stress about it now, but just kind of giving you guys an idea of what it looks like. But after that, once you're in medical school, you spend your first 2 years in pre-clerkship. Usually this is how most medical schools do work, where you just kind of are in class and you're doing lectures and you might have some other extracurriculars depending on the school. Each curriculum is different. And then the second 2 years are your clinical years. And so that's when you are doing your rotations in the hospital, actually seeing what it's like being in that hospital setting and being in the medical setting. And then same thing, kind of, you apply to residency, and there's different sorts of residency. So you can do internal medicine, which is 3 years after you graduate medical school, and then you can further specialize in, for example, cardiology or pulmonology, things like that. Or you can do surgery, which would be, that residency varies. I think it lasts from 3 to 7 years, depending on what field you want to go into. But that's all very in the weeds, very specific. And after that is when you can further specialize and do a fellowship. So it's very much so what field you want to go into, that kind of, I guess, can kind of like decide how much time that you spend in school and in training. But it is a long process, but it is very rewarding. And once you get to the point where you're actually in it, it's very nice to kind of see that like light and look and see, like, watch doctors, shadow them, see what it's like to actually do the thing that you've been wanting to do your whole life. So it's a lot, but it'll be worth it.
Yeah, so as Johnny mentioned, like everybody's path looks pretty different. Like I, for example, plan on taking a gap year, and that'll be between like my undergrad and medical school. But the very basic structure of what she said is you go to high school, then medical school, and then residency, which is kind of more training, and then fellowship, which is an even more specialized training. Um, like to simplify this even further, it's kind of like taking the SAT and applying to college times like two, uh, where you do it again for medical school, um, and then I guess again for residency. Obviously, you're not taking anything like the SAT, and the application will look different, but it's basically like a stepping stone to finally becoming a practicing physician. Does anyone have anything else to add to what John said? Cool. Moving on. So we're gonna go to Whit. What are kind of the commitments of a pre-med undergraduate student? Maybe not just like the expectations of a med school, but how do you also kind of keep the balance with everything that you're doing?
Yeah. Did you want Sanskriti to go about high school first, or did you want me to go? Is there anything?
Actually, yeah, that we should probably go to Sanskriti. So Sanskriti, sounds good. What are the commitments of a pre-med high school? What should a pre-med high school student kind of work on, and kind of leading up to their pre-med as an undergraduate student?
Yeah, definitely. So kind of touching on what Jamin and Janvi said, I think a important part of high school and kind of figuring out if you want to do medicine is exploring every other career that comes within pre-health. And so the best way to do this is either engaging in internships or shadowing opportunities. And I think that can kind of show you what like a day-to-day operation looks like in a hospital for many different types of careers. And it's the best way to actually get some like patient interaction and gain like some clinical experience that kind of teaches you the ins and out of like being pre-med and if it is something that you want to do. I know like whenever I did an internship, oftentimes like the nurses and the doctors would tell me that a lot of people would try to do pre-med and would talk to them, and then they would realize through those internships that I wasn't right for them and they would switch careers. And so I think this just kind of helps if you are looking to get involved in like learning about your future career early. And then going off on that, volunteering is also very important. With a career as a physician, it's all about service. You're serving your patients and you're serving your community. And the best way to show that this is a passion of yours is to get involved and go to your community and find ways to engage and give back. I like to kind of have a story with everything I do. So say if I'm passionate about something, I'll kind of tie what I'm or who I'm shadowing and what I'm doing with the types of places that I go serve. So it all just has a story and it's all relevant to me, my interest and my background. And I think that's a great way to show admissions as well that, you are passionate about this and you're not just doing it just to do it. And then also with shadowing, I think this is a great way to find people for your letter of recommendations that schools will always ask you for. You can engage with them, ask them questions, tell them a little bit about who you are. And this way you're forming a really good connection with a professional who's doing the career that you hope to do. And that can really help your application as well. And then all of this also just keeping up your grades and making sure that you're being well-rounded. I think that's the most important. And also to kind of set yourself apart, whether that be a story that you have that you want to share about yourself, or if it's like something that you kind of are doing that's like unique to you. So like getting certifications. I know there's a lot of different programs that give you like biotechnician certifications and like base certifications, things like that. If you can engage in those and then try to like work in that field as early as possible, I think those are great ways to get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. So any kind of healthcare exposure in any capacity would be really advantageous in high school. And I will say, like, also enjoy high school. You don't have to be like super like fixated on figuring out what specialty you want to go to 10 years down the line. Like I would give up a lot to go back to high school and kind of enjoy that time when things weren't as complicated and stressful. But so also kind of as Sanskriti said, as long as you kind of follow your passions and interests, your story will kind of write itself. And so that is something that I guess schools look for, especially when you apply to undergraduate and med school. And so kind of moving on to WIT, going back to that question, what are the commitments of a pre-med undergraduate student? And have answer from the lens of what a high school student should know.
Yeah, this is definitely a super common question that I got when I was like in undergrad doing like mentorship programs and things. A lot of freshmen come in. I mean, I remember being a freshman in the honors dorms with like Jamie and John V, and we're like, I mean, for me personally, I was coming from the perspective like I don't really know what I'm supposed to be doing. Like I was like, I do you just shadow and take the MCAT and do well, and then you're in. And then now that we're having so many more things like PhysiLink, people can come in to undergrad knowing more. I will say when it comes to high school, like a lot of people by the time you get to your med school applications, things that maybe now seem super big in high school will sort of go to the side. Like they were experiences that you had, but they're not going to be things that maybe you write about or mention unless they were super impactful. Um, and so some people come like when we were meeting undergrads that wanted to join like the honor study, for example, there would be freshmen who had done all this stuff, and then there would be freshmen who were like, I'm just exploring and trying to figure things out. And those are both totally valid perspectives to be coming from, and both of those types of students can end up becoming successful medical students. So whenever if y'all are a senior in high school and you're like, I don't know, I've done nothing, or you're like a freshman in high school and you're like, I want to do everything, you can be either of those and still make it to where you want to be. Everyone's on their own journey in that. But in terms of once you get to undergrad and you're like, now I want to get started, I'm I'm between certain healthcare fields where I really do want to do pre-med. There are certain things that you want to do. Shadowing is like, the basics that you have to do no matter what pre-health you want to go into. You're going to need some sort of shadowing in that field, especially for medicine. If you can shadow different specialties, that's a great thing as well. If you can shadow a handful of times with one doctor to get to know them, and sort of get a more in-depth look at what that looks like, and things for like letters of rec, like Sanskrit you mentioned, that's where something like that could come in. But also, I feel like another thing to do really early on is just do things and figure out what you enjoy doing, because your med school application, you want it to be about you, not about like a checklist of volunteering and internships you did just because you had to. Like, things, whether it's running or you are on these different club sports teams, or you do a women's encoding club, like anything that you like to do and want to do that isn't necessarily pre-med related, do those things, because they show you as a person, and they allow you to grow as a person and not just as a pre-med student. You don't want to just like keep yourself in a box, and make sure you're doing those things that sort of fill up your cup, just like John B was saying we have to do as med students now in med school. But extracurriculars can be anything from joining clubs to get to meet other pre-med students. Volunteering could be in any sort of field. I volunteered at a pet shelter freshman year during COVID because I couldn't find anything else to do. Or, you can volunteer in healthcare related things, volunteering in, Salvation Army, whatever it is. All volunteering is good volunteering. And then as you move through your undergrad journey, you'll start to tailor that volunteering towards maybe more of your medical interests. And then internships can look like a lot of things for a lot of different people. The word internship for me as a freshman was like super scary. It sounds like, you put on a tie and you go sit at a desk and you're doing some sort of like research for like a doctor or something. Like that's not what the word internship has to mean. It can really be what you want it to be. And almost every undergraduate institution is going to have people there that can give you information about getting scholarships for internships or connecting you with professionals in the field. So I would say the number one piece of advice from all of this is to find a mentor, whether that's, your friend that also wants to do pre-med, y'all are going through this together, whether that's a student that's a couple years above you, someone in the pre-health office at your college, or a local doctor, a family member, whatever, and start leaning on those people to help you find things that you want to do and help you sort of illuminate the path in front of you, because really none of us would be where we are today without the mentors that we had in undergrad and without us leaning on each other to get through it. So really, first thing you can do as a freshman when you get on campus is just find things that interest you, find people to talk to, don't stay closed in, and sort of start building those connections. And the other things like the volunteering and the internships and the shadowing, that'll fall into place as you move through. So don't go in thinking like I need to start writing a research paper when I first step on campus. Like take a deep breath, enjoy your first semester and get settled, and those things will come. The research, I know, is a big growing aspect of pre-medical education as what medical schools look for. That will sort of come. Many colleges are going to have like tons of support for finding things like research and stuff like that as well. So don't let that be a worry before you're even getting there and getting to your feet under you.
Yeah, I really like how you mentioned mentorship. Mentorship could really kind of change the like trajectory of your undergraduate career. A lot of people growing up told me to find a mentor, but I really had no idea how. And I found a mentor pretty late. I'd say like sophomore to junior year of undergrad, and so I mean, Whit and Jamie and John Me were all like great mentors to me. So they don't have to be like a doctor that's like 20 years experience in the field. They could literally be anybody. And we're having this webinar because all these students are willing to help y'all out. So if you ever need anything, feel free to reach out. But mentorship is a great way to kind of be pointed in the right direction towards all of the big things that Whit mentioned. But just a follow-up question to Whit. So you mentioned like shadowing, clinical hours, internships, research. Like how do students go about finding these other than like a mentor? Is this something that's like handed to them as soon as they walk in the door as undergrad, or like what should they do?
Yeah, part of the art is the ability to find it. I feel like a lot of students, like anyone, we all know most college students are going to be capable of doing the research if it's handed to them, and doing the shadowing if it's like standing there in the room. Like we can all do this. Part of the art of being a pre-med student is balancing those things and finding them. And organizations like honor societies on campuses, or checking your professional people that are paid by the college to help you find these things. Like these are great places to start, because when you just like step out into whatever city you start your undergrad and you're like, you're 18 or something, and you're like, I don't know how to just like cold email doctors to shadow them. Like that's a very real experience and a very like valid feeling to have. So I would say it doesn't need to be like you versus the world in terms of getting all of these experiences, but in some sense you do have to take that first step and take that initiative, because the earlier that you commit to taking the initiative, the more time you'll have to figure things out. I feel like the pitfall that I saw a lot of my fellow undergrad pre-med students take was like, I want to be a doctor and like I'll get there, but then there's not the initiative step, and then they get a couple years into undergrad and they realize like, wait, this isn't actually what I thought it was, because they waited too long to sort of start branching out to learn more about it. All the important things that Jamie and Sanscruti and Javi mentioned about getting immersed in the field. So it's a balance of both using your mentors, using the resources on campus, and also taking the initiative. Like just getting on listservs if your school has them, just getting anywhere where you are always just taking in opportunities. You don't have to take every single opportunity. There's going to be 1,000 email opportunities that are going to come across your screen, but it's the art of selecting the ones that you are passionate about and you feel like will be able to enhance your journey. That is what will allow you to be a successful applicant down the road.
Does anyone else have? Jamie, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to say that was extremely well put. And I think the only thing that I would add on to that is just also don't be afraid to reach out and ask for things. I think that's something that you don't have to do it right off the bat when you get onto campus. And again, it is intimidating at first, but once you find your footing, if there's something that you want to do, and honestly, from everyone I know on this panel, just like I've seen everyone do it at this point. And I think it speaks volumes to who you are if you can reach out to do something, or if you are like, okay, this is what I want to do and it's not here, try to find a way to make it happen, and a lot of people are going to be more receptive than you really think they would be off the bat, especially if you're taking that initiative. and coming into it with some sort of plan. So don't commit yourself to something that you don't want to do. Like, don't join a research lab that you know you will dread for the next 2 years. Don't do that. Try to find something. If you can't, like, reach out to someone doing something and be like, hey, I'm interested in space medicine research. Do you happen to know someone doing this? Or where should I go from here? People will guide you in the right direction. I mean, I just like, you come in thinking people are like cold almost, and then you cold email them and they're like, oh yeah, like I know this person doing it. Thanks for reaching out. And so just finding the people to kind of rely on, and when you do it that way, it really will align with what you're interested in. And that'll really come across and you'll enjoy it more.
Absolutely. Do not be afraid to reach out. I think that was probably my only goal coming in as a freshman into college. Just talk to as many people as you can, and you'll meet some really supportive, amazing people along the way. All right, so now moving on to Cooper. I know you just went through this entire process. Congratulations on getting into medical school. If you could just kind of touch up on what the medical school application process looks like, and maybe kind of stick to the basics for high school students.
Yeah. So if you got to this point and you're deciding like, hey, I think I want to start applying to medical school, the big thing that you need to look at is the MCAT. So the MCAT is kind of like the culmination of your first few years of studies during undergrad. And I really want to kind of go back and jump on this, that you do not have to be one major to be quote unquote pre-med. You just have to hit a few required classes to teach you the basics to take the MCAT. I personally have a Spanish degree. I do also have a biology degree, but I feel like I've learned just as much useful information within my Spanish degree that I have in biology. So basically, once you're kind of ready to go look at medical school, your MCAT is your first step. The MCAT is a pretty large test. I think it's like 7.5 hours long, consists of 4 sections. Within those 4 sections, it's like chemistry, biochemistry, physics, orgo, psychology, sociology, and there's like a critical reading section. So it sounds really scary, but basically people will devote anywhere between, I've heard people devote 2 months to a year to studying for it. I can talk about my kind of personal experiences. So I started studying for the MCAT right after sophomore year. I knew that going to medical school was kind of what I wanted to do. Had done some shadowing, had done some clinical work, and was like, yes, I do want to be a doctor. I personally started studying for the MCAT during the summer between sophomore and junior year, and then it ultimately took it like January of my junior year. I personally did not want to take a gap year. I just wanted to try to go straight through. But I have so many friends that are going through the gap year process, and I honestly envy them. They're gaining so many more clinical skills that I will have starting off medical school. So I basically studied, took my MCAT in January. Ultimately, it takes about a month to get your score back. Generally, when you get your score back, you kind of get to know, like, are you ready to apply to this process? And the MCAT is used for both MDs and DOs. So it's lucky that we can take one test and go either route. And then, so once you have your score, you basically look at that and your GPA and you pick out some schools. And then you start the actual application. So the actual application consists of a few parts. The first big thing is your primary application. Your primary application kind of has one big essay that's like why you want to be a doctor, like what of your experiences have culminated to you to get to this point of why you want to pursue a career in medicine. And then the next thing that kind of pulls from what Whit's talking about is that you get 15 activities, I believe it is, to describe all of the things you did during the last 4 years of undergrad or 3 years of undergrad. And this can be anything from like, oh, I shadowed this doctor for 40 hours to, I know for me, I literally put like, I liked photography. As photography was a really big thing for me. It was a big creative outlet. And I related it back to like my just how I view things. And like I like to look at things with a creative mindset. But you can put anything you want on there. This kind of primary application is your like, what are you on a box? So it has all of your activities, your hobbies. It takes your GPA. It takes your MCAT. Then ultimately you will go and send that off to a ton of different schools. Then if they like your first application, you'll get something back called a secondary. In that secondary, you'll also have to make sure that you have letters of recommendation. So usually I think it's around 3 to 5, but definitely check out when you get there, like specific schools. These are letters from professors, doctors you've worked with or former bosses or current bosses. They just kind of talk about your character. So you take that, you write some more essays for that specific school, and then you send those out again. The last part of the process to apply to medical school is ultimately some schools will give you an interview back. Interview can be as short as 50 minutes, or it can be an all-day event. Basically, you're being admitted, or you're getting interviewed by a panel of either students, admissions representatives from that school to see if you fit the mission statement of the school or you just fit the culture of the school. So kind of like John B said, that process goes on for the majority of your junior year if you apply straight through. I know personally I was interviewing. I submitted all my applications, submitted all my secondaries in August, was interviewing from about September through the present currently. And so you basically kind of get those decisions slowly during your senior year, and then ultimately you will decide on your medical school. But the big things to include in your medical school application, I know we've talked about some of them. I have a list pulled up. So clinical experience is the big thing. Either can be volunteer clinical experience, or you can have a paid position within clinical experience. I know personally I worked as a medical interpreter, both as a volunteer or as a paid position, but there's so many different options for you guys to do that. And there are some options even remote. Then the next thing, we talked about it already, is shadowing. It's really important to shadow because then you get a kind of an idea of what specialties you might be interested in. I know when I started the process, I thought I was going to do primary care. Then I really liked emergency medicine. Then I really liked orthopedics. So you never know what shadowing will do to kind of open your mindset when it comes to that. A newer thing that is more schools are kind of strongly recommending is research. But I want to be very clear, research looks very different for every individual. I know when you think of research, or at least when I did in high school, I thought of like mixing chemicals together, and I thought that was it. I personally did not do that kind of research. I was doing research related to my major in Spanish. I was researching how medical interpretation services impact the rate of healthcare outcomes here in South Carolina and across the country. So while I might not have ever mixed some chemicals together for a lab experiment for my research is something that I'm very passionate about, and I was able to convey that to medical admissions teams. And the last thing is community service. So we really want to make sure that you guys understand that you are going into a field where you're devoting the rest of your life to service. So showing that you have a commitment to service is a huge thing. But yeah, I think that's everything.
Yeah, thank you for the very thorough and detailed response. And all of that matters. And I will say this isn't something that you put together in 6 months before you apply, or even a year before you apply. This is it. If you want it to be kind of an easier process, it's something you want to kind of start as early as possible. I know that's something we discussed earlier. Try to get involved as soon as you come on campus, and just try to kind of keep these check boxes at the back of your mind, and also try to follow your interests and what you're passionate about, and your story and application and everything will kind of come together naturally. All right, so we are moving on to finally getting into medical school. And Ashley, if you want to just talk about what does medical school life look like, and what are kind of the main events from year to year?
So someone touched on it briefly earlier, but medical school, your first 2 years is mainly doing the book-wise content. So you're looking at all of your organ systems. So for example, you might have cardiovascular, which is focusing on your heart, or you might have pulmonary, which is focusing on your lungs. Depending on the curriculum, how you get that varies. But those first 2 years, you're focusing on your organ systems. Most curriculums will do the normal and then the abnormal. So your first year, you're learning how does everything work when it's working the way it's supposed to. And then your second year, you're transitioning into the pathology of it and what happens when things are abnormal. At our school, we just changed our curriculum. So we learn it all in one. So it kind of varies how that'll look for you depending on what school you go to. And then once you transition into your third and fourth years, like we said earlier, that's when you get into your clinical years. You'll be kind of getting to see a little bit of the big things, such as OB-GYN, internal medicine, family medicine, surgery. And then they have little blocks so that if you're interested in something really specialized, at least at our school, then you can put those in your elective blocks. So for me, I'm interested in radiology. That's not something that every student has to take, but because I'm interested in it, I'm going to make sure I have the space for that. And then as you transition towards the end of your medical school, that's when you start looking at residencies and where you're going to go from there.
So would you say, I guess, like the third and fourth year is kind of where you determine what you're interested in pursuing, or is that something you kind of start exploring from the beginning?
Yeah. I think it depends on the student and where their mind is. So if a student knows that they want to do something more competitive, like ortho, where it requires more research, more publications, better test scores, for example, then that student, knowing that it's more competitive, is really going to start from the beginning, making sure that their ranking is high within their class. They're making themselves competitive for things like AOA, which is a medical society, versus maybe someone who's like, well, I want to do something a little bit less competitive, maybe just something in primary care. They might be more open and less pressed to decide what they want to do.
Is extracurriculars a component that you worry about in med school? I know we talked about it in undergrad and high school.
Yeah. I think so. So I know when I went to a family medicine conference, it was really nice because I got to talk to a lot of program directors and ask them, well, what do you look for in your applicants? And one thing that they mentioned was wanting to see a student who had, if they say they're interested in family medicine, they want to see that you've shown that in your application and the clubs that you're involved with, that you're really interested in family medicine and not, for example, applying to it as a backup. Maybe you apply to one competitive thing and then you do something less competitive. They want to know that you're really passionate about the thing that you decided to apply for. And one of the ways you can do that is through your extracurriculars. And they can also just make you stand out, as someone was saying earlier, show that you're a person, show that you're passionate about something. So it doesn't always have to be medical related. It could just be something that you're really passionate about, that would be interesting to talk to interviewers about.
Cool. And then one more follow-up question. So on your slide, you mentioned that you're studying for STEP. What is STEP? What is it? What's the importance of STEP, and what does it kind of mean in the grand scheme of things?
Yeah. So STEP is, there's different tests that you have to take. So right now I'm studying for STEP 1, which is the first one that you would take after your first 2 years of learning book knowledge. And depending on the school that you go into, when they take STEP can vary. Some of them actually wait until later to take it, but at our school, it's after your second year. You've hit all the organ systems. You know, ideally, all the knowledge that you need to know that's going to be on that test. And then that just shows when you get to residency that you have this baseline knowledge that they're wanting you to have. So step 1 is pass fail. Step 2, which you're studying for and taking in your third and fourth years, that you actually get a numbered score back. And because they've changed step 1 to pass fail, there's more emphasis on what numbered score you're getting depending on how competitive the residency is. So with radiology, for example, they really care about the score, but they're less competitive in the sense of how many publications you might have. So those are things to be considering as well.
Great. Thank you so much. So for all of our high school students, after you finish high school, you do 4 years of undergrad, and then you do 4 years of, or 3 to 4 years of undergrad. Maybe you take a gap year in between, go to med school, which is another 4 years, and finally go into residency. So I know we've been throwing that around and we talked a little bit about it, but actually, if you just don't mind explaining what is residency for, and how long does residency take before you get finally a good practicing position?
So, residency is when you've decided on something that you learned in medical school and organ system or what have you, and you're like, wow, I really think the heart is interesting. I love cardiology. I want to do that as a doctor. So, then you would find that residency, apply to that, and get into it. And then that allows you to specialize and really hone in on what you're most interested in. Versus in medical school, it's like you're learning every organ system. Your knowledge is very broad. And then you get into residency and it's very specific. And then that also helps you with career choices down the line. So once you graduate from medical school, you are a doctor. You're an MD, but typically you would want to have the knowledge and also the board certifications behind your name to make sure that you're competent in terms of practicing, being confident that you're giving people the right diagnoses, giving them the right meds, stuff like that. So residency really helps you learn in detail how to be a doctor about the specific field that you're interested in. And then as someone said earlier, the time range varies depending on what you decide to specialize on. If we're saying generally, I would say 4 years, but like someone said, it could be 3 years, it could be 5. So it really depends on what you decide to go into in terms of how long residency would be for you.
Great, thank you so much. So this is a very long process, and so that's kind of why from the beginning we've kind of talked about kind of maintaining a good balance and pursuing what you're interested in. And that's just because just so that you don't burn out or kind of stress yourself out more than you should, because you are playing a very long game. So I know it's almost close to 7. So before we wrap up, this is kind of the general path that we've talked about, but there is a different, I guess, more accelerated path that you can take, or a path that looks a little bit different from the more traditional path. So since Gavriie, if you don't mind just touching up on the accelerated undergraduate to medical degree programs, because I know this is something that maybe if you're a junior or sophomore in high school, this is something you might consider.
Yeah, of course. So the University of South Carolina, their honors college provides a program called the Barsk MD program. It's a 7-year accelerated BS to MD program. So I applied my senior year of high school, I believe, and you do your medical school interview a couple months after that, and then get your acceptance around like your freshman year of, or I think they changed the program a little bit now to where you get it before you go to college. But you basically know that you're attending medical school, and the university offers this program called Barsk, and Barsk actually, you don't have to be MD to do it. There's a bunch of different types of Barsk majors. It's kind of like you combine any of your passions. So there's like dance and like exercise science, and you can combine different coursework in that and then make your own degree with it. And so specifically for Barsk MD, you can basically take whatever type of classes you want. So like Jameen, I'm interested in health policy. So a lot of my classes were focused on rural health, health policy, law. And then I took some fun ones like some music classes, and you basically can take whatever you want. But you also have to do your required like pre-med classes. So like organic chemistry 1 and 2, the labs, biochem, those classes as well. And yeah, so you take all of those and then you get your degree. And then after your senior or your junior year of undergrad, you start medical school as an M1, but you don't technically graduate yet. So you're still a junior, but you're starting medical school. And then when you're in medical school, when you get your white coat, you'll actually graduate college at the same time. So it's a little bit of a unique program in that it's very accelerated. You don't have to take the MCAT for this particular program. A lot of different schools like throughout the nation have like different types of BSMDs, but this one's a 7-year, no MCAT. And then I would say it's a really great program if like during high school you kind of do all the shadowing, clinical experience, volunteering, and you know that like pre-med is right for you. They typically look for that. They look for maturity, and they look for if you've kind of engaged in the field and know like the drawbacks and also like the successes going in. And then I would say just some things that may not be too appealing of the program. It can be rigorous and that you have to complete so many different things. You still have to do, like, if you have an honors thesis or research, you have to do everything that a typical pre-med student would have to do in 3 years, but you don't have to take the MCAT, which is oftentimes like the most rigorous part. And I think, yeah, if there are any other specific questions, Sham, you're looking for.
Yeah, so just to recap, yeah, the point of an accelerator program is to kind of take the strain off of you and kind of maybe shorten the time. So specific to USC Columbia, it's a 3 years pre-med, and then you immediately matriculate into med school. You don't have to take the MCAT. There are a ton of comparable programs throughout the nation that you could kind of look into as a high school student if you're dead set on pursuing an MD. Some are accelerated or some are early acceptance, meaning just straight out of high school, you get accepted into a medical school and then do undergrad and automatically matriculate with or without having to take the MCAT. There are some programs that require the MCAT, but there are a ton of different things that you could do if you want to kind of go away from the traditional path. All right, so does anyone have any questions in the chat that we could go over in the last like 5-ish minutes? And while y'all are typing that out, Gavriie, I know we talked at the beginning about like wellness and kind of maintaining a balance and avoiding burnout. If you want to just talk about that real briefly, and then everyone or all the panelists just want to put out like one sentence of advice after Gavriie.
Yeah, definitely. That's always been something that's been really important to me. And like you've been talking about mentors and stuff, everyone has always stressed to take care of yourself. And I know we can all hear that and you kind of brush it aside and you're like, yeah, but I have this to do, I have that to do, I have this full like list of a checklist that I need to complete. But truly it's going to be very difficult for you to be happy and find joy in whatever it is that you do unless you take time for yourself, no matter what that is. So that can look different for everyone. Some people love to exercise and like get active, reading, spending time with friends, whatever it is that's important to you, just to decompress. It's so important to take that time. And it's also very important to keep reminding yourself that even though things do get really hard sometimes, like you belong here. This entire process can be difficult, but you're something that you're working towards because you are smart, you're intelligent, you're worthy. And that's something that I tell myself every day. And I think it's something that I think everyone should do regardless of what it is that you're going into, because it is a very hefty process. But like I said, it'll be worth it in the end. And you just have to stay confident in yourself.
Just like to add that coming in as a freshman, I thought burnout was for the weak-minded. But I very soon realized last year I was just like completely tired with everything that I'm doing. So it is very important to prioritize from the beginning and kind of get into a good practice of doing that so that you can make it all the way to becoming a physician. All right, so if we want to just start with Jamie next and kind of go one sentence of advice for a high school student, and then we'll answer those questions in the chat.
Yeah, enjoy the process where you're at right now and at each stage of where you're going. Just take the time to kind of appreciate where you're at because you won't be back there again. And when you look back, you kind of reminisce. And so do that and just find the people that you can lean on in the process to make every part of it just a little bit better. Also, while I'm unmuted, just want to give Ashley her flowers. Be doing this during STEP study is impressive. So hopefully congratulations your way and thank you for being here. That's impressive.
Oh, I guess Jamie kind of stole mine, but I think it's because we all have the same sentiment of like really just enjoy, like where like freshman year is like such a fun time, and then like senior year as well, sophomore and junior between, is a little more stressful, but like really enjoy just, don't not go to that basketball game because you think you need to put in an extra hour of studying for something. If you can plan it better, like really plan your time to where you can still do those things, still go get dinner with your friends. Like I feel like sometimes, the people who are most likely to be pre-med are the people who really are just like perfectionists and really want to just do their best on everything. Like don't forget to put that wellness first and really just enjoy the process. Because, I mean, I'm sure in 4 years now, when I'm a resident, I'll be telling my first year med school student self the exact same advice. So why not tell you guys?
Kind of hopping on that. I think it's so important to like live in the moment, like you guys said, and just be willing to like everybody's journey looks a little bit different. And with planning, you can get a lot done. I know coming into college, one thing that I really wanted to do was study abroad. And I know that a lot of people told me that you can't be pre med, you can't study abroad. I met with my advisors really early on, was able to do that because that was one of the things like I really wanted in my college experience. And honestly, one of the best things I've ever done. And I got to talk about it in my med school applications. So don't be afraid to try something that's a little bit different from everybody around you because ultimately it's a part of your journey. And I honestly think that I learned so many lessons from that experience that I'll take into my career as a physician.
Yeah, kind of going off on that. I think my biggest thing, it sounds cliche, but it's genuinely just be true to yourself. Everyone's journey looks different, like everyone mentioned, and you're not going to get to your end goal necessarily the same way as someone else, and that's completely okay. And just remember that if the thing that you're doing is not making you happy, you shouldn't be doing it. So whatever you do, make sure you love it and just take it easy, and it will all work out in the end.
My little, I guess, one sentence would be similar to what people have said earlier, but just making sure that you have that adaptability and are okay with the wide range of things that you may or may not have to go through to get through medical school because everyone has a different pathway. And I just know for me personally, I didn't plan for COVID, for example, and I was applying to post-bac programs, and then it was like, oh, canceled. And different things in my life just happened where there was a major roadblock in between me and medical school, and I had to figure it out. And I think that adaptability is really important. So even if you might have in your mind that you want to go straight from undergrad into medical school, just be open to the other ways that you can get there and that you can get there as long as it's something that you really want to do and you're committed to doing.
Yeah, and thank you all for your advice. I know a lot of times, at least when I was in high school, when I heard stuff like this, I'd kind of brush it off thinking it was like a cliche, like kind of obvious thing, but the hard part is to really internalize what they've said and really follow it with everything that you do. And I promise you that when you're done with all of this, you too will say the same thing to people younger than you. And so really try to internalize what's being said. Melanie asked a great question that I think I can answer in the chat. When looking for volunteer shadowing and internships in high school, do you need to go through the school to find these opportunities? Can you find this on your own? You can literally find opportunities in any way, whether that's through the Career Center at your high school or undergrad, or whether that's through friends. An internship that I did here as an undergrad student, I actually found out because Jameen and Whit mentioned it. And so that was just like a personal connection. They mentioned it or did that experience and recommended it. I'm currently an honors ambassador, and that's something that Jameen was in my class and also randomly mentioned that I should apply to. So that's through friends. But if you talk to your career counselor, a lot of times they have different like internship programs and hospitals reaching out to them, looking out for high school students. And so talking to them would help. I think the baseline thing to do is to just talk to as many people, connect with as many people, and try to expand your network so that you get all the resources or as many resources as you can. And then from there, just kind of see what sticks and what will be useful for you. But I would say like my very first shadowing experience was also just one of my parents' friends. But from that clinic, I was able to meet a ton of other doctors who then pointed me in the direction of other doctors. And that's kind of how I found the mentor. So as long as you start, the starting part is the hardest part. But then you kind of, it's like a web where you start to find more resources and people start approaching you. All right. If anyone doesn't have anything to add for that, Sanskrit, if you want to answer the accelerated program question?
Yeah, of course. So, like I mentioned, with the accelerated program, it is all done in 3 years, and it kind of starts as soon as you get out of high school. So, it can get overwhelming in the sense of you have the same type of like commitments and requirements as other pre-meds do. You do have to take all the like rigorous like science classes. You have to complete specifically for this program, you have to do a thesis project, but those on the program, their thesis, it has to be around like 2 or 3 times like longer than the average, just because of the program's requirements. And there's other things of that nature that can kind of just cause it to be a little bit overwhelming. But like I said, with the MCAT being like out of the equation, it just kind of there's less pressure on you to do well. I mean, while like you always obviously want to do well, it's like you're not necessarily, having to do as much as everybody else is, like in terms of shadowing and volunteering. A lot of us still do participate in those activities because they just give us joy. And so many of us do. But there's pros and cons to both. But I will say that it is a great program. If you want to do pre-med and you know that you want to get into it right away, it is great. But you also don't get, that gap year and you just have to finish it quicker.
All right, thank you, Sanscuti. And then finally, is there a way to get less burnt out during studying for the MCAT and other activities you do to become a doctor? And we touched up on this, but does anyone have anything else to add?
Just
Go ahead.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I just have one sentence. I was gonna say that cliche thing of like comparison is the thief of joy. I don't know who said that. It's probably said it a million times. But when it comes to being burnt out, like if your neighbor's doing the MCAT and studying over Christmas break and doing all this stuff and you don't want to do that, don't make yourself do that and burn yourself out. If you want to take the gap year, whatever it is, that would be just like my short and sweet advice for that. And then Cooper, you can go from there.
I think the big thing with the MCAT specifically is just build a schedule, but also be willing to understand that life happens. And sometimes you got to like be flexible in that. And also it's not realistic to like study like hundreds of hours in a month. I think that that's the kind of a lot of people get to right before the end of like their study period, right before they take it, and they try to cram all this in. I think for me, having taken it about a year ago, the big thing for me was being able to do things that I enjoyed and things that gave me joy. So for me, like I'm a big football fan. I knew that I still wanted to go to every single home football game here at Carolina. So while I knew I had other friends who would maybe not go to the football game and spend the days at the library, I knew that I wanted my free days to be Saturdays so I could still go watch football. That might not make like everybody happy, but that was something that made me happy. And it was something I always looked forward to. So I just think it's really big about pacing yourself through the process. It's not a sprint. It's just like you just have to walk slowly, build all the concepts because it is a lot of information. But just know that like you guys are all capable. And one bad test score is not going to be the end of the road. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that was very well said. I completely agree. I mean, I had a similar situation too. I took the MCAT in January and I spent that fall semester studying, but tried to have a good balance the entire time. But one more thing I wanted to add is, put quite simply, don't do more than you can. Don't overcommit because I know, going back to what Whit said, if you're comparing yourself to everyone around you and you're seeing them do a million things, it can be kind of stressful and overwhelming. But truly, there are only 24 hours in a day and you cannot do more than that. So keep that in mind as you go on with your journey. Take a lot of time to focus on a few important things that matter to you rather than trying to do a bunch of different things and only giving it like half of your attention. Just really focus on setting a limit for yourself, setting boundaries, and doing your best to really stick to those and having a good balance.
Absolutely. And like Cooper said, this is a marathon and not a sprint. But at the same time, that doesn't mean you start studying for the MCAT like as a freshman, because that is the easiest way to get burnt out. You kind of want to time it right, not overwhelm yourself, but at the same time, don't start too early because that is the way to get burnt out as well. And we have one more question, and we'll wrap up. What AP classes are recommended to take in high school if you're interested in going to pre-med? Anyone can answer depending on how much you remember about AP classes.
I can go. I think it really is nothing like I think that's it. If you can take AP Bio and AP Chem, those are helpful. But really, any AP credit that you take in high school will be helpful because you can get into your like curriculum a little bit faster, and you can focus more specifically on pre-med classes or what you're passionate about. So I would argue any AP classes, if you're passionate about them and you can do well on them, take them. But there's nothing wrong with not. You don't have to line up your schedule of AP classes to be a successful pre-med. There's a lot of opportunities to take those classes when you get to college.
I agree with that. I took AP classes and none of them were science related at all. It was like AP literature, world history, US history, stuff like that. And I would also say, I think it depends on which college you apply to and get into, but at least with mines, they only accepted a certain amount of AP credit. So you want to be aware that depending on which undergrad you go to, you don't know how they're transferred or if maybe they'll take AP classes not related to your major, but then they might want your major classes. So biology, if you were a biology major, to be taken at their university. So there could be a lot of little nuances that go into it. But I also agree that any AP class would be good.
Yeah, going off on that, I completely agree. Like you can take literally whatever and you'll almost always get some sort of credit for it. But my counselor in high school always told me to look at like a college that I'm interested in going to and then looking up a specific like major that you're interested into. So like biology, and then look up U of SC biology major map, and it'll show you what like biology credits you need to kind of finish that degree. And then if you look at like the college, it'll also show you like what AP scores they'll take and what courses they'll count towards. So if that's something you're interested in, kind of like not wanting to, do some of like the early bio classes and things like that in college, and just trying to get them out of the way in high school, that would be like a great resource. So yeah, looking at major maps also helps, but you can take whatever. It truly does not matter.
And one last thing, it does give you a ton of flexibility. I think as Cooper mentioned, like if you're coming in with AP, IB dual enrollment credits, you are going to be able to take maybe more courses in something that you're interested in, maybe get a double major, a dual degree. I finished a business administration minor, working on a computer science minor. So it gives you the flexibility to like pursue whatever you're interested in. Or you could even take less classes and do like a part-time job, like really up to you, but it's definitely going to help you. All right, well, if there are no other questions, feel free to exit the webinar. Thank you so much for being here on a Monday evening. You can definitely reach out to all of our panelists through us, PhysiLink, but if y'all would like to also put your contact information in the chat, they could reach out in a way that they could reach out to you. That'd be also good. But if you want to just reach out to the PhysiLink Gmail, we'll connect with you or get your question answered. But thank you all for attending. We hope you found this useful and have a great rest of your night.